July 8th, and we're seeing the movement that was announced yesterday. A breakout above 64,000, which is the middle of the channel. Possibly a bit of a pullback to regain some strength, and then we'll see throughout the video how the price reacts over the next few days. Let's make the forecast. For the next few days, since it's June 8th, we'll look at 3, 4, maybe 5 days ahead. That's a reasonable time frame for the movement to play out. We're not just going to analyze that time frame, but we'll also look at how the price movement is behaving. In other words, which phase of Wyckoff we're in over the long term to get a very clear view in that time frame, meaning 3, 4, or 5 days. We're going to ALW. We're always going to look for, no matter what we do, what the big players are doing. In other words, those institutions or groups of people with a lot of money who move the chart, any chart, however they want. We're going to watch what they do. We're going to follow those traps or strategies they use, and we're going to make money the same way. The first thing we always have to do on any chart, here we're looking at Bitcoin on the 4-hour chart, but this applies to any chart, is to look for support and resistance levels. As you can see, these are areas where Bitcoin, in this case Bitcoin, always reacts in some way, and the volume spikes, giving us clues about what the big players are doing. In my course, I explain how to determine support and resistance levels, but for this analysis, I'll tell you exactly which ones we're following. Support at 60,000 and resistance at 69,000. This is the channel we've been following during this period. Right now, we're right in the middle of the channel, dropping a bit to gather momentum. We'll analyze what the next move will be. We have support set at 52,000 below and resistance at 74,000 above, but in the short term, we're not going to reach that far. We look for Wyckoff phases, which, as you know, Wyckoff tells us how the big players operate, meaning those phases of accumulation, markup, distribution, and markdown. We always have to look for them from very large time frames to smaller ones, so we can fit one movement into another and do really, really good trading. Currently, in the long term, we're in a Wyckoff accumulation phase. Markdown accumulation. All right, with that in mind, let's go back to the 4-hour chart and see how that accumulation phase has played out. Now we're zooming in, and we're in this phase. An accumulation phase always oscillates between support and resistance. It always has. When it gets to the middle of the channel, some play. It can even turn around, gain a bit more strength, either in an upward or downward direction. But the final movement, as long as we're in accumulation, will be to go from 69,000 to 60,000, with some nuances whenever it passes through the middle of the channel. But that's always what we're going to see. To detect exactly, we now have a pretty, let's say, pretty general view of what the price of Bitcoin is doing, without getting into what the big players are doing. To see what the big players are doing, we always have to look for volume spikes across all time frames. On the 4-hour chart, it's above 1.5 billion on mex.com, and what we do is see how they react when it reaches a certain parameter. The key support and resistance levels on the 4-hour chart are, as I mentioned, 60 and 69. But there are other support or resistance zones that we don't mark on this time frame, but that still have some importance. Not in every move, but in some. For example, this area around 61,500 has been very important the last few times the price has crossed that zone. And as you can see, the first time it crossed in an upward direction, it spent some time moving within a short-term accumulation channel. The second time, it was a very significant bounce, also with a lot of volume, which shows us that the price quickly returns to its zone, which is the middle of the channel. Now we've seen a significant drop this morning, getting close, not to the area, not as low as it went before. It reached 61,400, a bit less, and now we're already seeing how it starts to bounce on the 4-hour chart, not getting quite as close, but reaching what we could call that zone. Because you know that whenever I talk to you about support or resistance lines, they're not exact lines, but rather zones. And every time the price gets close, it tries to fine-tune it in some way. We've seen these reactions from the big players every time the price has tried to drop. We've seen one here, a really big one, with this large wick as well. which Japanese candlesticks also give us as a clue. And then this one, a second one, also very big when it was in a higher zone. The most logical thing to understand in this scenario was that the movement was going to be and get close again to 64, but it tried to catch its breath a bit. The movement of Bitcoin or any asset is always like that. Even if you think all the clues are pointing to one area, suddenly the price can drop or rise to catch its breath, to gain momentum, and then, yes, start that move. In most cases, about 80% of the time, it'll go where the clues were telling you at the beginning. What we can understand in the coming days, which is what the forecast we were making, is that it'll strengthen again at 64,000. We've also said over these past few days, and it's what the clues keep telling us, that it will break through 64,000, touch 65, and then retest it from above. This way of retesting is important. Now, what it's retesting, the price of Bitcoin, the middle of the channel, which is 64,000, it's retesting it. Or we could say it's testing it from the lower area. In other words, it makes attacks from below and then regains momentum. It makes attacks from below and then regains momentum. What we'll see in the coming days is a bit of a paradigm shift, and it will be above, and the attacks will be made as support. Right now, it's making them as resistance. That's what we can expect in the next few days. These signals I'm explaining to you here on the 4-hour chart are to anticipate the movement for a few days ahead. If what you prefer is to do intraday trading, you need to look for those same signals on a smaller time frame. 30, 15 minutes, 1 hour. Those are the time frames for intraday or scalping. For example, here we see that same signal, that long wick, that entry by the big players. Here on the 30-minute chart, it's usually above 300,000. On the 15-minute chart, it's 125,000. Something like that. You have to look at your chart to see how it shows up and spot those signals. Here, for example, we're looking at it. Right now it's 11:38 on July 8th, and we can see how the big players are coming in and trying to turn the price around. And they've already tried several times. But once the price gets close to 64, what I mentioned on the 4-hour chart happens. It picks up momentum again to retest it from below. Now, this is an area where we expect it to retest the 64 zone again. I'm talking about intraday, retesting it from the lower area. If what you like is having a read on the market or a market read for intraday or scalping, I share 2 entries, sometimes a few more, the 2 entries I make in my personal trading in the VIP Telegram, and I'll leave you a link in the description. Let's see. We've already set up the forecast for these days, which is what matters to us in this kind of video, so you have time to see how the price is reacting and set your positions, a bit according to your own strategy, but always looking for what the big players are doing, which is what I try to do, looking for those clues that the big players give us. Now, let's take a look at the July challenge, which is the easiest way to make money in trading, which is I started on July 1st with a $500 account on mxc.com, and I make micro trades aiming for a TP, that is a profit, a gain of $15 on each trade. I always enter strongly in the direction of the trend when the movement has already shown itself. And it's just to catch a small move, not like what we might do in intraday, swing trading, or in the medium short term, where we look for longer trades. In this case, these are very small trades, always going with the trend. What I do is, let me show you here the last trade I made, the TP that mex.com sent me. What I do is when the month ends, whatever profit I've made, I started with $500, let's say I end up with $800, I'll raffle it off among everyone who signs up on mex.com and makes their first deposit. I'm Mikel Vasquez, and this is Daily Bitcoin Analysis. I really appreciate you watching this video, and as I always say, this is not financial advice. I'm just sharing my experience with you after more than 15 years in professional trading. Stay tuned for tomorrow's clues, because the price is moving. It's about to break through the middle of the channel, and we're waiting for that retest from the upper zone. As soon as that retest happens, we'll be entering a new phase. Stay alert. See ya.